Our presenters today are Bram Wessel, co-founder and principal at Factor, and Chris Comstock, Claravine's chief product officer. A little more about our presenters and their companies. Bram has more than 20 years of experience working with some of the biggest brands on their information architecture and UX design. He's also a prolific speaker on these topics, and we're pleased to have him presenting today. Bram's firm, Factor, is an information architecture, UX, and taxonomy consultancy. Factor has a long and successful track record of guiding organizations with vast and complex information ecosystems through the capability development and organizational change needed to manage their real-time information architecture at enterprise scale. Chris has more than 15 years in the digital marketing and data management fields, working as a consultant, brand, and product leader for a variety of top companies. He now heads Claravine's product vision. Claravine is the leader in digital experience data management, with over 3,500 brands globally using our software to standardize, enrich, and connect marketing data across teams and channels. We help teams achieve the marketing precision needed to drive conversions across every customer touchpoint. Chris, Bram, thank you for joining. Bram, can you start us off on how to unify and govern your information layer?
Thanks so much, Mike. We'd like to begin by telling you a story that will demonstrate how important structured and standardized information can be to your organization. What follows is an actual case study of work Claravine and Factor did with a very large marketing team, but much of what we learned is applicable to organizations of any size or business function. Our story begins with a Fortune 50 tech manufacturing company. This company is historically great at marketing, and they spend about $2 billion on marketing each year. This means that over the years, they've evolved a huge and complex stack of marketing software. More than 18 systems at play were involved in the work we did with them. Everything from content management systems to enterprise search appliances, to digital asset management, to CRM, to ERP, any acronym you like. In fact, sometimes they even had multiple instances of the same system or even redundant systems addressing the same business function. For example, they had analytics tools from both Google and Adobe that different teams were using for different reasons in different departments or divisions just in marketing. If that level of complexity sounds intimidating, well, it was. This vast and complex marketing ecosystem was very powerful and in many ways functioning very well, but it was also causing major headaches for the people on the ground who had to use it to get their day-to-day work done. For example, when marketing executives needed to understand what impact this company's huge marketing spend was having on sales, it took dozens of people weeks to create even basic, incomplete reports. And even when they were able to complete reports, often the data wasn't fully reliable. Campaigns couldn't be assessed, measured, or adjusted in anything close to real time. When you spend $2 billion on marketing, I gotta tell you, not having the confidence or line of sight into how this massive a spend is performing, that can cost as much as tens of millions of dollars each quarter. The reason for all of this was the organization's inability to extract consistent information across systems, teams, or marketing activities. They didn't have any centralized or standardized way of defining core marketing concepts. So it was like they were comparing apples to oranges, to grapefruits, to, I don't know, plantains or durian, instead of just to apples. And that was because there was no common vocabulary. Well, once we got under the hood, one of the first things we did was just try to get our arms around what we were dealing with. So we decided to map all of the taxonomies and all the systems they were implemented in. We went around to group after group and asked them to describe the information they were managing and where they were managing it. When we were done, we came up with this diagram, and our main project sponsor took a look at it and said, "Wow, this looks like a drunken bowl of spaghetti." we realized that not only would we need to standardize the definitions of terms in many of these taxonomies, but we would also need to centralize how and where they were managed. Only then would this organization begin to be able to measure these things at an enterprise level. What we came up with was a new model and a new way of managing these critical information assets. Taxonomies and metadata would be standardized and centrally managed, but they would still need to stay in sync with all the systems that needed to use this information. For this organization, we called this model the Enterprise Marketing Taxonomy, or EMT, which pretty well described what it was, its scope, and what it would be used for. Here, we could have a central definition of core concepts like campaign and share standardized definitions across the enterprise. Marketing organization, you probably think a campaign is an important thing to have standardized, right? One of the key aspects of this approach is that the modeling environment allows us to create subsets of the core model to share locally with teams and systems. So they're not overburdened by having to ingest the whole model. And this is something we call a local view. So now the organization was able to compare apples to apples and to compare plantains to plantains if that's what they needed to do. Now that we've told you this story, maybe you're already starting to see that it has implications for your organization as well. That's because of a thing we like to call the information layer. What the company in our story needed to do was devote more care and feeding to its information as a living, breathing organism. Understanding that there's an information layer in their organization, that was their first step. And it's not just Fortune 50 tech manufacturing companies that have information layers. You may not realize it, but you probably have one too. Chances are pretty good. These days, almost all organizations, even ones that don't sell technology or information, have at least two things. They have a core technology stack, that's the technical layer, and some kind of digital experience, that's the experience layer. What ties them together is information in the information layer. That means you need to think of the information your organization owns, controls, and manages as an asset that drives your business just like your technology, your user or customer experience, your people, and your products and services do. It has real tangible equity, and cultivating it can open up new capabilities and even new business opportunities. So how do you tell what your information layer is made of? Ask yourself how and where you define your content, data, and other information assets. What information gets implemented in your technical systems, and what information shows up in your user or customer experience? The information in your information layer, it drives your customer experience, your digital marketing. It creates operational efficiencies, and it is how you analyze how your business is performing, and so much more. Think about it. Your organization probably has either products or services. Most organizations do. And there's a lot of information that describes or defines these things. More and more today, this information is scattered across multiple systems and processes and teams. Unifying all of your organization's critical information assets allows your organization to align around one voice and a common vocabulary. And creating a model for this is really only the first step. Once you've defined and gotten on top of your information layer, gained control of it, you need to maintain it. You need to govern it. It's an ongoing improvement process. So in our story, this is where we brought Claravine into the picture, because they have a solution for governing this information that was a great fit for our Fortune 50 tech company. So now, Chris Comstock from Claravine is going to tell you more about that part of our story.
Thanks, Bram. Now that we've talked about how the taxonomy and information layer was defined, let's talk about how we operationalized it. Many companies have different forms of governance in place today, either within certain teams or in their email, social publishing, or media buying platforms. Each of these teams may be doing their best to adhere to a standard taxonomy, but it's very difficult to ensure everything is defined and validated correctly without a centrally defined way to define and govern that taxonomy. For this Fortune 50 company, they have hundreds of people contributing content and marketers creating campaigns to promote the content. As we can see here, while they're creating content and campaigns, each team is capturing different pieces of metadata, but there is no consistency. Some teams are tagging the channel, while others are including country and business unit, but no one team is providing all the data they need to consistently track these experiences. After rolling out the data model and taxonomy with Claravine to each of these teams, all digital experiences were tagged with the same metadata before the content was published or a campaign went live. By moving this data standardization to Claravine, they were able to centrally define the data model while allowing each of the teams to manage their own content and campaigns through the Claravine platform. While it may seem simple to let each team provide the metadata for their campaigns or content, there are a few key elements of data governance. First, you need a centrally defined taxonomy for both content and marketing campaigns. Second, a governed process for tagging and creating that content. For campaign tracking, you also need a governed process to support generating and implementing campaigns across the many different teams. The process can vary from how your email team launches a campaign to how your agency runs a cross-device campaign. Next, an automated way to validate those pages, marketing tags, and data readiness is all working together. The automation of the pages, tags, and data is one of the more overlooked steps in the process and something you can't go back and solve after an experience has gone live. Finally, a way to centrally manage the data formats and data flow across your marketing ecosystem. Now, how did this Fortune 50 company apply the key data governance elements to their content creation and marketing teams? Let's take a closer look. On their content publishing process, Claravine was used to centrally define the taxonomy. When a new piece of content is created, each author goes through the process of entering the content details into Claravine based on the defined taxonomy. Once the data is successfully entered, a new workflow is triggered for the content publishing team to leverage the metadata in Claravine. Finally, once the content is reviewed and validated, the page is pushed live through their content management system. Now, for marketing teams, the campaign creation process is very similar, where they have a taxonomy centrally defined in Claravine. The creative and campaign elements are created and tagged in Claravine, which leads to the campaign codes automatically being generated based on the data governance rules put in place. The next step for the marketer is to validate the landing pages are live, the correct marketing tags are working, and all data is being collected to launch the campaign. For some teams, this QA step can be a very manual and potential blind spot to one or more experiences not being configured correctly. Once everything is set up and ready to go, in both situations, the Claravine platform sends all the data to the various analytics and execution systems to prepare for the campaign launch. The final step is to analyze the results and make any optimizations or business decisions. Since all the campaign data was available for the analytics and marketing teams, they're able to make faster decisions and achieve better results. The benefits of a governed process can have a number of impacts across an organization. For this company, the analytics platforms and teams had improved accuracy and unified cross-channel insights. For marketing teams, they were able to create richer, more targeted audience profiles while improving content performance. And overall, more personalized experiences and increased digital engagement are achieved because they had better data to make better business decisions. While all this may sound great, you may be wondering, where do I start? Or how do I implement something similar? As we've rolled out the Claravine platform for many different organizations, we've seen a common pattern for our most successful customers. The starting point is to take the time to define the taxonomy and data model you want to use. It may take some extra time to interview stakeholders and gather requirements up front, but this will save you time down the line. Next, you want to start with a single team, which is willing to experiment and is flexible with their current process. Another consideration is to start with a team where you can show an immediate return on investment for the business, either through time savings or ideally increased revenue. After you have one team on board, you can expand to other teams or channels while using the ROI proof points to help get them on board. You will want to make sure you have success points across each channel marketing team to support global adoption. And finally, once you have enough proof points, the company can roll this out globally across any of your digital agencies. If you follow this approach, you'll be taking small steps to implementing a standard taxonomy across your marketing organization.
Awesome.
Thanks, Chris. So we have a couple of offers that we want to tell you about. One is attendees of this webinar are invited to schedule an expert conversation with both Claravine and Factor, and that is a brief conversation to get deeper into what challenges might happen or be occurring in your information ecosystem. So that's really a deeper discussion on the steps and best practices to implement something like this. And we're also going to be offering a workshop. Learn more at the URL that you see on the slide. And this is going to be a live workshop that we're going to be offering in at least one city coming up in October, that's dedicated to giving you some hands-on experience with Factor and Claravine people to learn about how to develop your own custom taxonomy and the practical steps to enable governance. So you'll learn some best practices, get some hands-on experience, roll up your sleeves and dig in, and at least come to a starting point that you can take back to your organization.
Great. Thank you so much, Bram. Thank you, Chris. That was excellent. And we do have a few questions from the audience here that we would like to take. So I'll go ahead and read them off, and then one of our presenters will answer it. First question we have here is, what would be a tangible first step someone would take?
I can take that one. So with this Fortune 50 marketing company, the first step they took was to attend one of Factor's workshops, and this was in Vancouver, BC in 2017. It was part of a larger conference called the Information Architecture Summit. And the stakeholder from this company came out of that workshop with an idea of the scope and nature of the problem and invited us to propose a private workshop with them. So that private workshop was a 2-day on-site with the company and some of the key stakeholders. And at that workshop, that's where we came up with the drunken bowl of spaghetti diagram. That's where we started to plot out what all of the systems at play were. So a really good first step is just mapping your ecosystem, really to understand and get your head around what is out there. What are all the different places where information lives, and what are all the different taxonomies that are being managed within systems and teams and processes. Once you have that picture, it makes it a lot easier to then say, all right, here are the places where we can unify some things, and here are the places where we need to have local control maintained.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bram. I have another question here that kind of segues from what you were just talking about. How long does it take to build these information models, and also how long might it take the full team to get on board?
Yeah, I can follow up. So the process to create the enterprise marketing taxonomy in our example really took a few months, probably 3 to 4 months. It doesn't have to take that long, depending on the size and complexity of the challenge. And then the we're in year 3 of our engagement, both Claravine and Factor with this company. And the subsequent time has been spent onboarding different groups, because remember, this is a massive organization that we're talking about. So onboarding different groups, building out some of the taxonomies, implementing the Claravine solution. And so it's a long-term project. You need to be committed to a long-term effort, but you can get to a core definition of the critical information assets in 6, 12, 18 weeks.
Yeah, and I think I just would add to that a lot of this information already sits within spreadsheets that different teams are using. So
yeah,
they realize it or not, they already have a lot of the information and potential answers to defining that information model, and getting teams to just align on kind of what the final model looks like. Just is typically more back and forth from what we've seen on the Claravine side. And, from our side, it's once you get aligned there, and I think, the great work that Factor's done, being able to put that into practice is more just configuring the Claravine platform with the different teams that should have access, do training, and get them up to speed on how to use the platform.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question here, are there technologies that assist in the unification of the taxonomy?
Yeah, so Claravine's solution is really helpful for governing and managing metadata, and has a lot of really strong capabilities. There are also other tools that companies use, including taxonomy and ontology management systems that are specifically designed for that centralized management of this information and these core assets. And they have both import-export, manual, all the way through real-time API level integration with a lot of contemporary systems. So probably most, if not all of them. So it makes it really easy once you have everything defined to manage it centrally and create those, what we call those local views that can then be shared and updated. And that's the key, updated across the system landscape.
Yeah, and a lot of our customers, we end up, using those export capabilities from the taxonomy and ontology systems to build out the configuration within the different teams for those local views within Claravine.
Thank you. Another question, Bram, you were speaking about the drunken bowl of spaghetti. I'm wondering how, when you're doing your discovery, how does shadow IT impact the discovery process? Does it jeopardize the integrity of the project?
Actually, what we found is that shadow IT or IT organizations, they are burdened by this problem just like everybody else is. And so by reaching out to them and really trying to understand the challenges that they have in managing all of these different systems, that we were able to bring them into the conversation and demonstrate how this model would make it more efficient for them as well. Certainly, that's not true for every organization we've ever encountered. There are different layers of shadowness, I guess you might say, to where the bodies are buried in IT. But the key is to sell everybody on this centralized vision. And one of the ways that we have found is that you have to have both grassroots participation and engagement, and you have to have leadership that's willing to set a mandate that this is going to be the method of managing that the organization is going to rally around, so that you get political buy-in from all of the stakeholders from different business functions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering, I have another question here that is kind of related. How do you get, for example, a marketing team to change their process?
Yeah, I think we all probably have worked with different teams who kind of still live in Excel from a day-to-day. Either they've got, drop downs built out, macros and VLOOKUPs and all that good stuff. And so we work closely and kind of have ways to import that data and really make their life easier. And ideally from a time savings perspective, from a kind of validation and ensuring everything they're doing, they don't have to really worry about, fat fingering something or doing something else. Because even if they do that, the Claravine platform can still catch those errors and make sure everything's been set up. So for them, it's really, we view it as a time savings and more of a partnership than trying to get them to actually change their process.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'll be discussing in the hands-on workshop is a tool that we've developed to assess when it makes sense to manage a taxonomy or a set of metadata or an information asset at the enterprise level, and when it makes sense to keep things in local control. The key is to not disrupt the process that marketing teams and functions are using as much as possible, to be as least disruptive as possible, so that you can provide some of the benefits of this model of management without limiting or restricting the access that they need to the information that they manage.
Okay, great. Thank you both. We have one final question here. What are some indicators where an organization would need this kind of structure introduced?
Sure. Whenever you find that information is out of sync in different systems, whenever you find that there's redundant information, you have, say, 2 systems of record, you've got, a taxonomy in your content management system and another taxonomy in your digital asset management system. And those 2 are closely related, and there's overlap, but there's also a disconnect between them. Then you kind of know that you have this problem. That diagnostic tool that I talked about, when it makes sense to manage things at an enterprise level, is a way that you can kind of go through a more methodical process and identify that. If your user experience is starting to have problems because information is showing up in the wrong place at the wrong time for the wrong user, or if you have problems with the search experience. Search often can be a trailing indicator of a deeper information problem. We were once brought into another Fortune 500 e-commerce company where they thought that they needed a new search appliance for their enterprise search, but once we got in and rolled up our sleeves, we discovered that this kind of information layer disconnect was really the core of the problem that was affecting everything in the search experience. So really looking at the experiences that your staff are having, the experiences that your customers or users are having, is a really good way to identify some of the pain that might be addressed by some of these information layer problems.
Yeah, and for a lot of our customers, usually the one of the early indicators is either in their analytics platform where they're seeing tracking codes come through. So, obviously a good thing that the campaigns were tracked, but they're not being associated either to the proper channel, to the proper campaign. And so you've got analytics teams spending, hours a week, maybe, 40, 50 hours a week across the enterprise, trying to make sense before they can even start their analysis. For Adobe Analytics, it's the unclassified, uncategorized bucket. I think many people can resonate with that. They want that to go away, right? They want all the tracking codes to be classified so they can have proper attribution, which is ultimately what each of the marketing teams want as well. And then I think on the paid media side, I think at some point, every brand has had a situation where a campaign's gone live and either, tracking has been not set up properly, going to a landing page that's not functioning properly. That's usually a pretty good indication that they need to centralize the management of this to eliminate that problem and make sure before those experiences go live, everything is set up properly and functioning.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Great, thank you. Those are all our questions right now. If for some reason we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with a written response after this webinar. Thank you all for joining. Let us know if you have additional questions, and we'll be sending out the recording very soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.